Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillahi amma ba'd. There was a request by one of the many hadith disciples with regards to how to strengthen your Arabic language. And also, what mukhtasarat, short, concise books, should a student of knowledge begin and start off with. As for the first question, we've spoken several times about this, about Arabic, learning Arabic, its importance, its virtue, and also the necessity of being proficient in the Arabic language. We've done videos on this. And every single verse in the Quran and hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that deals with the superiority and the essence of seeking knowledge also includes learning the Arabic language. Because you can't understand the Quran and the hadith, you can't get into those Islamic sciences until you have a good, strong command of the language. That's first thing. So the specific question is how to strengthen your Arabic. Me personally, I would say, is that first and foremost, you have to realize your purpose. Why do you want to learn Arabic? You want to learn Arabic just to read the Quran? You want to learn Arabic to make it easier to memorize? You want to learn Arabic to understand the Quran and when it's recited? Do you want to be a student of knowledge full time? You want to study hadith? You want to go overseas? In other words, what level do you want to go to? Because the person who wants to go for the gold, as they say, go for the gusto, go all the way out, then of course he has a different method and a different approach. He has a long-term goal. Someone wants something short and simple to live as a Muslim, an everyday Muslim, or a good religious, pious Muslim. To understand the Quran, there's a different approach. So me, personally, I would say that it depends on how far you want to go. How far you want to go. There are general principles, such as starting off with vocabulary. Many brothers that come from America, they get caught up in grammar. They want to study grammar. They want to study self. This rule of grammar, that rule of morphology, and so on and so forth. And you ask them, how do you say cantaloupe in Arabic? You say, how do you say this? What's the cantaloupe in Arabic? Or orange? Or avocado? Okay? Or watermelon, for example. And they don't even know. But you ask them about, what's mudaf ilayh, majrur, maf'ul, and they know the rules. They realize, that's not right. You have to start off with a wealth of vocabulary words. A strong basis of words. No grammar, no plurals, no sentences, but just learning words. Just like a child. Okay? Then I would say it's good to start off with the phonics and phonetics. And also how to properly read. Many brothers I've seen, many collab here, we train them, we tutor them, we mentor them, they can barely read. That's a problem. That's a big problem. So start off with the basics of reading. Don't get caught up in the rules and the grammars and the adjective, the alphabet. Start off with the basics. Small, simple, baby steps. As Allah says in the Quran Kareem, Allah says that the valleys, they flow and they do measure. And they do measure, step by step, piece by piece. Another piece of advice is to practice your conversational Arabic with people who speak Arabic language. If you live in a place in which there are foreigners, quote unquote, or immigrants, people who come from overseas, from Palestine, Egypt, Tunisia, Morocco, people who come from Mali, okay, wherever, Sudan, they speak Arabic, you should try to practice with them. And I remember when I used to go into the restaurants and try to speak Arabic, and they would laugh at me in the beginning. But they didn't, discourage me and deter me. I kept practicing, alhamdulillah, until I reached my goal. Another important point of advice is to learn Arabic like you're an Arab child, or an Arabic-speaking child of someone in an Arab-speaking land. Don't learn Arabic necessarily like somebody who wants to go and read explanation of Sahih Bukhari, because that's technical. You want to start off like a baby in Syria. You want to start off like a child in Lebanon, preschool, kindergarten, all right? That's how you want to learn your Arabic vocabulary, your words, different ways in which they sing and chant things. Meaning like, we're not talking about music or singing, we're talking about like nursery things like this. Okay, everybody understand what I'm talking about? Hopefully the business about. In other words, you have to start off like you're a child. Don't start off like a grown person with a mind thinking of this major technical science, because that could possibly hinder you. And that's a long discussion with regards to the Medina books. Most brothers who study the Medina books, and they start off with that technical way of learning Arabic, most of them, and there's no disrespect to the Medina books, or Dr. V, or anyone else, but this is reality. Most brothers that I've seen in Western countries who start off with those books, their Arabic is very robotic. It's very mechanical and rigid. It's not, it doesn't flow. And you find other students, say those who studied in Egypt, or in Syria, or Mauritania, they're making some fresh drinks right now. I said, boys, we didn't do that outside. Got it. So really good fresh juices to break your fast with. Really a nice one on top. You find them who study in other countries, and they took the approach that I'm speaking about, is that they speak Arabic in a more fluent manner, like it's second nature. But that's a long discussion in itself. And most importantly is that you have to work hard if you want to strengthen Arabic. It's not going to come easy. It's a foreign language. It's a second language. It's not a Latin language. It's a whole other way of writing it, a whole other side of the page. So you really have to work hard, and you can't do that unless you seek help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Be diligent and seek Allah's help. Seek Allah's help and be diligent. That is in brief. And before we move on, practice makes perfect. You must practice, you must practice, you must practice, you must practice more. As for which small books to study, then first and foremost, the student of knowledge should focus on the Quran al-Kareem. You should try his best to memorize as much as you can from it, to have the proper tajweed, the proper recitation. You shouldn't say, as some students of hadith say, and you point out the mistake, as-sirat al-mustaqim. But it's a tab, mustaqim, etc. He should have a proper recitation of the Quran al-Kareem. He should try to understand what he can, but what he should focus on is memorization. Because the older you get, sometimes the more difficult it becomes to memorize. You can always read the tafsir. You can always sit down and reflect, get more wisdom. But memory is something that should be done with the youth, according to the best of their ability. Here are Islamic sciences. We have ulum al-ala, we have ulum al-ghaya, or ulum al-ghaya, all ghayat. We have auxiliary sciences, tools, and then we have sciences which you actually want to study. In other words, if a person came from Saudi Arabia, or went from Saudi Arabia to America, and he wants to study medicine, before he can even study medicine, what's the first thing he has to study? English. He has to take English. Even though that's not his major, but that's the auxiliary science, that's the ala, that's the tool to medicine. So you have to study the Arabic language. Usul al-fiqh, mustalah hadith, even tajweed, things like this, that assist you and aid you in studying the three main sciences of the deen, which are tafsir, al-fiqh, and al-hadith. Those are the three main ghayats, the things that you actually want to keep, and you actually want to study them for what they are. Everything else, or most other sciences, are bridges, ways to understanding the hadith, ways to understanding fiqh, and ways to understanding the tafsir. So to keep things short and not to make things long and drawn out, a good book on tajweed is Tuhfat al-Atfal, short, simple poem on the basic rules of tajweed. It's easy to memorize. The book is available to find. They have explanations of the book. As for the Arabic language, after you learn vocabulary, things like this, we want to study grammar. Al-Muqaddimah ala al-Rumiyya. It's simple, it's well known, it's classical. Nahw al-Wadih, for example, is a very good book on Arabic vocabulary and grammar. And a lot of people, they sleep in that book. I benefited tremendously from that book when I was very young, about 17 years old, when I was in high school. Another small book with regards to Usul al-Fiqh, for example, Al-Waraqat. Al-Waraqat is a well-known, famous classical book on legal theory. As for Mustalah al-Hadith, then alhamdulillah, we've done several classes on this. We've explained al-Bayquniya, we've started explaining Nukhbat al-Fiqh, we've started explaining Taysir Mustalah al-Hadith, Al-Tadhkir ibn al-Mulaqin. As for a small, simple book on Hadith itself, Hadith al-Ahkam, Bulugh al-Maram, Umdat al-Ahkam, alright, Al-Muntaqa, it was a bit bigger, a more mature Hadith disciple, but it's still mukhtasar. For example, 40 Hadith, okay. As for Tawheed and Iman and Aqidah, then there are many books. The first book is the Quran al-Kareem. That's the best book of Aqidah. And that's the best way to study Aqidah. Take the verses about Allah's Tawheed, about Iman, about the last day, so on and so forth. But as for a specific book, then from the most comprehensive books on Aqidah is Al-Aqidah al-Wasitiyya of Shaykh Islam ibn Taymiyyah. And there are many other books, like Hamawiyya, Kitab Tawheed, Surah Thalatha, etc. The list goes on. There are many other mukhtasarat. I think we mentioned most of the things, yani Arabic, Mustalah, Usul al-Fiqh. As for actual fiqh, then that's a long lecture in itself. How to study fiqh. Do you study madhab first? Do you study fiqh of the sunnah first? Comparative fiqh first? But before we move on to any other topic, what I forgot to mention is, before you pick a book, and many people they make this mistake, and I've been asked this question so many times. What books to study, what books to study? We say before you talk about studying the book, you need to become an apprentice. You need to become a disciple. You need a teacher and a mentor. Somebody that can sit down with you, take your hand, walk with you, and show you the path. Then that's going to teach you the ways of learning. Teach you the ways of learning. Let him recommend a book to you. Him or her, whoever you, male or female, we're talking to. That is the first step. If you can't find a teacher, try to find someone closest to being your teacher. Whether it's in another city, another state, another country, online, via whatever means that Allah gives you, the first step is to become an apprentice. And if you look at the great ulama of the past, from the earliest centuries to the 7th, 8th medieval classical times, 9 out of 10 of them, if not all of them, they were all apprentices. They all had studied. They were all under the tutelage of someone else. Very rare, very seldom, where you're going to find someone who was self-taught and became something great and had a large, strong impact and influence upon the ummah. Alright, and often those people who were self-taught and they did write books and they did go far, you find there's a lot of mistakes and errors in their teachings and writings. So therefore the first step is to learn under someone and let him guide you and let him teach you. Even if you don't study a small book. You don't have to study a small book. The important is that you study the basics. Whether it comes from a book, whether it comes from a teacher. This is in brief and short. We've done many lectures about this. And then we'll do more lectures about this in the future. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Alhamdulillah.